Yes, I think there'd be multiple achievements really. Firstly, representing Australia, I suppose, at the Olympics in 1960 would be a major one. But prior to that was probably getting selected in my first New South Wales basketball teams from 1955, and the ultimate selection for the Olympic Games after the 1959 Australian Championships. So that was the first highlight, and I suppose a career in basketball. I was the first full-time employee of Basketball in New South Wales, and the second in Australia, with Lindsay Gaze being the first from Victoria. So that was a big achievement, and basketball in those early days was a minor sport, and in some ways we were trailblazers, and that was great going into basketball, trying to build the sport, grow the development of the sport, not only in playing numbers but with providing facilities. And we're doing this interview here in the Broadmeadow Basketball Stadium, and I was one of the secretary manager at the time when this was built, and obviously there was a lot of work coordinating the construction of the stadium, and I think it's been a great success. And Newcastle was a leader in stadium facilities, building the first stadium at Wickham in 1960 when the Australian Championships were played there, and this was the second stadium in New South Wales. So they were great achievements, and probably highlights of my career. Leading on to other things would be winning the Australian Championships in 1967, as captain of the New South Wales team, and there was quite a lot of country representation, Newcastle representation, and the coach was Dr. John Raschke, who's being inducted tonight as a legend of the sport, and that was certainly a major highlight. It's always nice to be recognised, and I can honestly say that from my early career in basketball, I was always had the aim of developing the sport into something bigger than what it was, and I think in a lot of ways this recognition is nice, to realise that probably some of those goals have been achieved some 60 years later. So that means a lot to me. It's great. I looked at the international website yesterday, and I noticed that Australia's ranked 4th in the world, behind USA, Spain and Russia. And when I took on playing basketball and management in basketball, we had a very minor ranking. So that's great to look back and see that there's been great achievements over that period. I think in the last 75 years, my most vivid memories would be the early days of basketball. And as I mentioned earlier, that we were trailblazers, and basketball was a very small game. And I just remember playing in stadiums like the Broadmeadow Stadium here and the Wickham Stadium, where we had packed crowds. People were turned away from the games, and so that was a very exciting times. And we were able to develop a fine group of young players here. We're all good friends. I'm still friends with a lot of those players today, and that's what sport does. And I think it probably illustrates that the amateur sport fulfills those ideals more so than probably the professional sport. So I think they're my greatest memories of having friends around me, being fit, playing hard, and enjoying the sport. Look, I think we're really in a consolidation period at the moment. Grassroots basketball, I think, is doing reasonably well, but I think there needs to be a greater emphasis to build the numbers. And I know there's a lot of competition with other sports, and a lot of money with TV rights with the various football codes and cricket, etc. But I think basketball's probably got to take another tack, and it's a great game to play. There's no reason why we can't grow the numbers, and I think that's got to be the emphasis over the ensuing period. The national teams are doing well. We've got a good profile, but it is a shame that I think there's 350 of our best players in the American college system, and it'll be lovely to see them playing in competitions around Australia and growing the game. So I think that's the challenge, and hopefully that's being addressed at the top levels.